December 12, 1944. Luxembourg City. Allied command centers are buzzing with tension as reports from the front begin to paint a grim picture. The Ardennes forest, deep in enemy territory, has become the stage for one of the most critical confrontations of the war, the German Ardennes offensive, later immortalized as the Battle of the Bulge. The reports arriving on Eisenhower's desk detail sudden breaches in the American lines, villages overrun, and supply routes cut. It is clear to anyone reading the dispatches that the Allies are facing a challenge they did not anticipate with the precision and scale they had hoped. In a high-rise conference room in Luxembourg, surrounded by maps, charts, and impatient officers, a meeting of unprecedented importance is convened. Supreme Headquarters is filled with tension, the atmosphere thick with the urgency of decisions that could alter the course of the war. Eisenhower, calm but deliberate, listens as generals from across the Western Front provide updates. Reports are conflicting. Some sectors report orderly retreats, others describe chaos and collapsing defensive positions. The situation is fluid, chaotic, and potentially catastrophic. Into this mix enters General George S. Patton. At this moment, Patton is commanding the Third Army, positioned in southern Germany, ready to pivot north in response to the German offensive. Intelligence reports indicate the enemy is concentrating elite panzer divisions, including heavy Tiger tanks, to cut through thin American lines and reach Antwerp, the Allies' crucial supply port. If the Germans succeed, months of careful planning and progress could unravel in a matter of days. Patton's reputation as a bold and aggressive commander precedes him, and Eisenhower's staff is acutely aware that his decisions in the coming hours could either stabilize the front or provoke disaster. The meeting begins with the expectation that all generals will adhere strictly to pre-approved strategies. Eisenhower's staff emphasizes caution, consolidation, and adherence to the overarching strategic plan that ensures the protection of key supply lines. Some commanders argue that the Third Army should wait for reinforcements and maintain defensive positions until additional support arrives. They emphasize the risks of advancing too far into enemy territory without secure supply lines, citing recent intelligence about potential German counterattacks. Every word spoken reinforces a fundamental concern. Patton's characteristic speed and audacity, while often effective, could be catastrophic if applied recklessly under these circumstances. Patton, however, has his own reading of the situation. He examines the maps, considers enemy positions, and assesses the disposition of his own forces. He believes that speed, initiative, and aggressive movement are the only ways to regain control of the front. Hesitation, he argues silently, would allow the Germans to consolidate, fortify, and deepen the crisis. To Patton, the war is not won by meticulous adherence to plans alone. It is won by seizing opportunities as they emerge and forcing the enemy to react to one's movements rather than the other way around. As the discussion continues, voices around the table grow louder. Some officers express outright concern that Patton's desire to advance could provoke disaster, leaving divisions exposed, isolated, and vulnerable to encirclement. One senior planner even suggests a formal restriction on his movements, a move designed to rein in the Third Army until additional resources arrive. Eisenhower listens carefully, weighing the strategic implications against the operational reality. He understands that any command to halt Patton risks delaying the counteroffensive and giving the Germans an unbroken window to exploit. Patton responds not with words alone, but with precision. He references terrain features, enemy movements, and intelligence reports, demonstrating that his plan is not reckless improvisation, but a calculated gamble rooted in real-time assessment. His strategy calls for a rapid pivot northward, outflanking the advancing German panzer divisions and cutting off their supply and reinforcement routes. By moving faster than the enemy expects, he anticipates creating confusion, compelling surrenders, and restoring the integrity of the Allied line. The tension in the room reaches its peak when a staff officer, one responsible for logistical coordination, questions the feasibility of Patton's proposal. Supplies are stretched thin, roads are partially blocked, and armored units are already operating at maximum capacity. If we move this fast, the officer warns, we risk leaving our fuel and ammunition behind. Entire divisions could be stranded. A murmur runs through the room. The potential for disaster feels palpable. Every general present recognizes the stakes. This is not merely a tactical decision, but a moment that could decide the outcome of the Ardennes campaign itself. Patton's response is decisive. He points to intelligence that suggests German movements are overextended and that their reserves are not yet positioned to react effectively. He argues that speed itself is a defensive measure, that by striking aggressively, his forces can seize the initiative and relieve pressure on the front lines elsewhere. The logic is clear to him. Hesitation is more dangerous than risk. He stresses that his divisions are trained for rapid maneuver, that supply issues can be mitigated by careful use of mobile reserves, and that delay will only embolden the enemy. Eisenhower sits in silence for a moment, weighing the perspectives of his cautious staff against the audacity of Patton's proposal. The room feels suspended in time. Outside the window, the winter light filters into the headquarters, highlighting the tension etched into every officer's face. Strategic choice hangs in the balance, and the decision will have immediate consequences for thousands of soldiers and civilians alike. Finally, a compromise emerges, though its nature is subtle. Eisenhower does not explicitly endorse the full extent of Patton's advance, nor does he impose a complete restriction. Instead, he grants operational discretion, emphasizing that progress must be balanced with communication and logistical awareness. In effect, the Third Army is given permission to move, but with implicit caution, a directive that satisfies no one completely but allows action to proceed. Patton interprets it as full authorization, while his staff interprets it as conditional, leaving everyone acutely aware of the potential consequences of miscalculation. That day's meeting closes with a fragile balance of authority and initiative. Orders are dispatched, units are prepared, and the Third Army begins its northward pivot with remarkable speed. Within hours, German reconnaissance detects unexpected movements, signaling that Patton's gamble is already underway. Enemy commanders scramble to adjust, attempting to anticipate maneuvers that move faster than they can react. For the first time in the Ardennes offensive, the initiative belongs to the Allies again, and it belongs entirely to Patton. As the Third Army surged north, Patton's staff faced a logistical nightmare that would have paralyzed a less disciplined force. Supply columns struggled through snow-choked roads, bridges that had been damaged or destroyed required improvisation, and fuel shortages threatened to stall the advance at every mile. Yet, Patton's philosophy of mobility over caution meant that he accepted these risks as part of the operational equation. He knew that momentum itself was a force multiplier. A fast-moving offensive could paralyze the enemy more effectively than any perfectly stockpiled supply line. Every gun, every tank, every truck that moved forward not only advanced the line, but also sent a psychological shock through German command, who had assumed their counteroffensive would encounter predictable resistance. By the evening of December 13, reconnaissance units had already penetrated areas thought impassable in winter, encountering pockets of German infantry and armor that were unprepared for such rapid penetration. Patton personally reviewed reports, marking sectors on maps with colored pins, and made real-time adjustments to unit assignments. Unlike traditional headquarters that waited for confirmation before issuing orders, Patton's system relied on continuous, immediate feedback. Radio operators transmitted observations from forward units, and decisions were made within minutes rather than hours or days. The speed at which these decisions were executed created a ripple effect. German commanders found themselves reacting to a situation that no planning could anticipate, and confusion began to spread throughout their ranks. Meanwhile, back at Eisenhower's command center, Staff officers monitored the progress with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Communications from Patton indicated that entire German supply depots were at risk of being encircled within the next 48 hours. Maps that had previously shown static lines now displayed rapidly shifting fronts, with American armored units advancing in unexpected directions. The success of the maneuver rested not only on audacity, but on flawless coordination across dozens of moving parts. Units from infantry, artillery, reconnaissance, and engineers were all required to act in concert while maintaining the tempo dictated by Patton's vision. Reports began arriving of German Tiger tank battalions attempting to regroup and halt the advance. The Allies had anticipated these heavy units would be decisive in repelling the Third Army, yet Patton's maneuvers had already positioned American Sherman tanks, tank destroyers, and artillery in overlapping fields of fire, exploiting terrain and visibility to neutralize the superior armor. The battle unfolded as a study in contrasts. German tanks, expecting frontal assaults on prepared positions, now encountered a network of mobile, flexible defenses that could strike and vanish before counterattacks could be coordinated. By the morning of December 14, the full scale of Patton's audacity became evident. Units that had begun as spearheads now threatened to cut off entire German divisions from retreating to their secondary defensive lines. Radio intercepts captured by intelligence indicated panic among German commanders, who found that reserves were too distant and reinforcements too slow to respond. Every moment Patton maintained his pace, the German operational plan began to unravel. The Third Army was achieving not only tactical victories, but a strategic disruption that threatened the enemy's entire offensive in the Ardennes. Yet the success came at a cost. Supply officers were stretched to the limit, men suffered from exhaustion, and vehicles broke down under the relentless pace. Patton was aware that a single logistical failure could stall the advance and give the Germans the time needed to regroup. He compensated by making real-time decisions about prioritizing fuel and ammunition, personally authorizing the rerouting of supplies to critical units while ignoring traditional protocols that would have slowed the process. This level of operational improvisation was unprecedented, and it exemplified the unique risk-reward balance that defined Patton's command style. As the advance continued, small-scale engagements with German forces demonstrated the effectiveness of Patton's philosophy. Infantry units, supported by artillery and airstrikes, were able to exploit gaps created by the rapid movement of armor. German defenses that relied on carefully prepared lines of fire and strongpoints were bypassed, leaving garrisons isolated and vulnerable. Captured documents and prisoners provided further insight into German intentions, confirming that the Third Army's speed had disrupted the enemy's ability to coordinate and respond. Throughout this phase, Patton maintained direct involvement in operational decisions, refusing to delegate critical judgments entirely to subordinates. He held impromptu briefings at forward command posts, consulting maps alongside division commanders and adjusting orders based on the latest intelligence. This hands-on approach allowed the Third Army to remain cohesive despite the immense pressures of winter warfare and the chaos created by constantly shifting battlefronts. By December 15, reports indicated that entire German battalions had been cut off and surrounded. The rapid advance not only stalled the enemy offensive, but began to force surrenders en masse. Patton's decisions, which had seemed reckless to cautious staff officers just days earlier, now demonstrated the tangible benefits of speed, initiative, and audacity. Each success reinforced the psychological edge that the Third Army held, as German soldiers began to doubt their command's ability to respond effectively. The momentum of Patton's Third Army created opportunities that commanders in more conventional armies could only dream of. Cavalry units, long relegated to reconnaissance, found themselves conducting rapid flanking operations, cutting off retreat routes and intercepting German supply convoys. Engineers worked tirelessly to repair bombed-out bridges and clear snow-blocked roads, often under the threat of enemy artillery, ensuring that the advance never lost pace. Every element of the army became a cog in a machine moving faster than the enemy could predict, a machine powered by audacity, experience, and meticulous understanding of terrain. German commanders were forced into increasingly desperate measures. Orders that had been meticulously planned over weeks were now being discarded in favor of last-minute counterattacks. Communications broke down as units encountered encirclement, and panic began to infiltrate the decision-making process. Reports from the front lines described disorganized columns attempting to retreat through narrow forested roads, only to be ambushed by advancing American armor. The psychological effect of Patton's speed became as deadly as any gun or artillery barrage. Soldiers who would have otherwise fought fiercely now surrendered en masse, understanding that the Third Army was striking faster than they could react. The air war complemented Patton's armored advance. Tactical air support, coordinated with remarkable precision despite the winter's harsh weather, strafed German positions, disrupted reinforcement routes, and provided real-time reconnaissance to forward commanders. Pilots working with radio operators on the ground relayed observations of enemy troop movements directly to Patton's command posts, allowing instantaneous adjustment of armor and infantry placement. This integration of land and air power, executed under Patton's insistence on initiative over procedure, transformed what could have been a slow, methodical operation into a rapid, decisive campaign. Despite the successes, the strain on logistics was mounting to critical levels. Fuel depots were exhausted faster than anticipated, artillery units required resupply, and medics were overwhelmed by casualties sustained not just in combat, but also due to frostbite, exhaustion, and accidents on icy roads. Patton recognized that the success of the campaign rested on a delicate balance between operational speed and the endurance of his forces. He made personal inspections of supply lines, issuing orders to prioritize essential items, improvising solutions such as redirecting trucks from less critical sectors to keep spearhead units moving. These decisions were risky, and some staff officers openly questioned them, fearing that overextension would leave the army vulnerable. But Patton's understanding of human psychology extended to his own troops as well. He knew that maintaining the tempo of the advance had a direct effect on morale. Soldiers who saw immediate results from their efforts, who witnessed the enemy surrendering and territory being gained, remained motivated despite the hardships. By contrast, the Germans experienced the demoralizing effect of being constantly outmaneuvered and outpaced. Each captured village, each forced surrender, and each disrupted supply convoy reinforced the perception that the Third Army was unstoppable. By December 16, reports indicated that German resistance in several key sectors had collapsed entirely. Infantry units that had been prepared to defend positions with lethal efficiency were now disoriented, retreating under pressure from both advancing armor and coordinated artillery strikes. The strategic implications were enormous. Patton's rapid advance threatened to cut the entire northern wing of the German offensive in the Ardennes off from reinforcements and supplies. The careful, methodical planning that German commanders had relied upon was rendered irrelevant in the face of Patton's audacity. At Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower's staff began to realize the broader consequences of the Third Army's maneuvers. Patton had not only countered the immediate threat, but was also creating opportunities for encirclement and annihilation of significant German forces. The speed of the advance forced high command to reassess their operational assumptions. What had seemed reckless was now proving to be strategically brilliant. Communications flowed constantly between Patton and his superiors, with maps and reports showing a constantly shifting battlefield where initiative, rather than strict adherence to orders, determined success. Yet as always, risk shadowed every decision. The rapid advance exposed flanks to potential counterattacks, Isolated units were at risk of encirclement themselves, and the harsh winter terrain made every movement unpredictable. Patton had to constantly weigh the immediate tactical gains against the operational risks, knowing that a single misstep could halt the momentum and allow the Germans to regroup. His decisions were made under intense pressure, with lives on the line and the broader outcome of the campaign hanging in the balance. By the evening of December 17, the full extent of the advance was evident. Entire German divisions were cut off, surrendering in unprecedented numbers, while the Third Army's spearhead was poised to exploit further gaps in the enemy line. Patton's insistence on speed over caution, audacity over procedure, and initiative over rigid command structures had created a battlefield reality that no one had anticipated. Officers who had doubted him now acknowledged that his methods, though unconventional and high risk, had produced results that conventional planning could not. The following morning, Patton's advance continued unabated. Reconnaissance units scouted ahead, reporting pockets of German resistance that had yet to fully grasp the scale of the Third Army's momentum. These units were often lightly armed, composed of remnants of infantry who had retreated from earlier engagements, and their morale was fragile. Patton's armored columns moved around these positions, bypassing them when possible, and engaging only when necessary to prevent counterattacks from disrupting the main thrust. The fluidity of movement was key. Each decision was calculated to maintain momentum rather than to achieve perfect tactical alignment. Artillery units moved in tandem with the armor, often navigating roads barely wide enough for trucks and howitzers, sometimes under direct enemy fire. Crews worked around the clock, digging gun emplacements in freezing soil and setting up firing positions in previously impassable terrain. Patton personally inspected several of these forward artillery positions, issuing on-the-spot directives that would improve firing efficiency and resupply chains. His presence instilled a sense of urgency and determination among the troops, reinforcing the belief that their commander was willing to share the risks he demanded of them. Meanwhile, Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights attempted to identify the patterns of Patton's movements, but the speed and unpredictability of the Third Army made German aerial intelligence largely ineffective. Fighter squadrons were diverted to intercept sporadic enemy sorties, while bombers struggled to find concentrations of troops, often attacking empty fields where German forces had already withdrawn. Patton's ability to synchronize ground and air operations without waiting for formal approvals frustrated both Allied planners and German commanders, highlighting the stark contrast between his operational philosophy and the traditional methods of military command. By mid-afternoon, reports began arriving of German units attempting desperate counterattacks. Panzer divisions that had been held in reserve now engaged in hurried assaults against the flanks of Patton's columns. These attacks were often piecemeal and poorly coordinated, reflecting the chaos that had overtaken German command. Patton, aware that overextension could invite disaster, adjusted the deployment of his armored brigades, reinforcing vulnerable points while keeping the main thrust moving forward. Each decision balanced the risk of exposure with the imperative of speed, a calculus that defined his command style. As evening fell, captured prisoners began providing valuable intelligence. They described entire units caught in disarray, supply lines cut, and leadership panicking as the Third Army advanced faster than anyone could anticipate. Patton's intelligence officers rapidly processed these reports, feeding the information to divisional commanders who adjusted their maneuvers accordingly. The cumulative effect was a cascade of operational advantages. German units were misdirected, morale plummeted, and Patton's forces faced fewer organized attacks as the day drew to a close. Back at Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower and his senior staff monitored the situation with growing astonishment. Communications from Patton were often terse and commanding, reflecting his confidence and insistence on initiative. Staff officers debated whether such audacious actions might provoke unnecessary casualties or overextend the army, yet the results on the ground were undeniable. Every risk Patton had taken had yielded tangible operational gains, validating his unconventional approach and further cementing his reputation as a commander who could seize victory where caution might have failed. In the following days, the Third Army encountered more organized German resistance, including elements of the elite panzer divisions. These units were better equipped and more disciplined than the remnants previously bypassed, presenting a more formidable challenge. Patton adjusted his tactics accordingly, employing combined arms maneuvers that leveraged artillery, armor, and infantry coordination to neutralize enemy strongpoints while maintaining the tempo of the advance. His understanding of terrain, enemy behavior, and the psychology of both his own troops and the opposing forces allowed him to navigate these engagements with precision and adaptability. Supply lines, though stretched to the limit, continued to function through constant improvisation. Engineers constructed makeshift bridges, trucks were rerouted dynamically, and requisitioned resources from liberated towns were integrated into the logistical network. Every advance depended on this intricate balance of planning and improvisation, a testament to Patton's ability to operate within chaos while still directing a coherent military strategy. By the end of the first week of the Ardennes campaign, Patton's Third Army had achieved what many had deemed impossible. It had regained the initiative from German forces, stabilized critical sectors of the front, and created the conditions for a larger counteroffensive that would eventually crush the German offensive in the region. The combination of audacity, speed, and flexible command had produced a decisive impact, demonstrating that in modern mobile warfare, calculated risk often outweighed meticulous preparation.